Okay, so in yesterday's video, I talked about how I won that contest that the zoo had done, that I decided, since it didn't talk about anything, any kind of prize really, other than your picture would be basically the centerfold picture for the zoo's upcoming spring summer newsletter thing, or magazine or whatever it is. I don't know. I talked about the only reason I decided to submit was I happened to have these pictures that I really liked, and since it didn't look like anything big was writing on it, I decided to submit these 3 pictures, and my bear picture won. So yesterday I was I had to figure out the printer issue and print off a form so I could give the zoo permission to use my picture, and of course they were going to use my name with anytime they use it, but you know, I had to give them permission for it. So this was a whole thing, and the problem that came up was in my phone getting connected to the printer. And I was all excited about this thing that I just won, right? And I just found out that morning that I won as soon as I got home. This is like within a half hour of finding out that I won. I was printing off this form, or trying to, and was having issues with my phone connecting to the printer. And my parents decided to open their mouths, and then it became this thing that it wasn't. You know, and it ended up, it was literally just my mom trying to push me to ask my dad for help while I wasn't at the point where I was ready to ask him for assistance. But since she said that, he's like, well, what's it doing? And it's like, and so I said, it was looking like it wasn't connecting or whatever. He's like, well, if it doesn't look like it's connected, it probably isn't. It's like, but it was just the added in feeling of, feeling of being called a dummy, in that just be the way he approached it and was talking to me about it. And while he didn't come out and say dummy, he has called me various other names in the past, and so I don't think it was far off for me to read that in there with the way that the conversation had come about. And since I hadn't asked him for anything, that was, my mom said I should, and he volunteered a smart-ass remark, and I was just like, I'm handling it, butt out, you know? So it went from this, you know, and mom yells at me because clearly I was the one out of line, right? It's like, I was just trying to print this form, and I knew I was entirely capable of printing the form, and I knew the printer was working at this point in time because it's been used recently. Whereas sometimes in the past it doesn't work immediately because the ink situation's jacked up or whatever. So there's this whole thing, and ended up making me feel really shitty after I won this contest that I was all excited about, and I cried through the video a lot, and I would like to say that that was the extent of the crying yesterday, but I did a whole lot of crying yesterday. It's like every time, like when I watched the video again, it's like I cried all over the entire time, and then just like randomly throughout the day, like this would come back up. What is going on? I just want this out of my system. It was very frustrating, but did not end there really, because my brother wanted me to pick up Gracie after school yesterday, and since the car I would normally drive is in the shop and the other 2 weren't home at the moment, I checked in with my mom to make sure she would be back around so we could go pick up Gracie. Now, I would have asked her if she wanted to, just so she doesn't feel like we're keeping her away from the kid or whatever, or can't use that as an excuse. But with everything that's been happening within the family and with my brother and my healing processes, of course, I do my talk therapy for the YouTube channel, and he goes to actual therapy, and we talk a lot about everything that comes up for either of us, and kind of are learning from each other as well. And my mom and I go to pick up Gracie, right? And we're sitting over there, and we're in the parking lot for like a half an hour before school actually lets out, so we can pick her up pretty quick. And Gracie just, in the past, Gracie got bullied in the car line, or waiting for pickup from the car line, by a couple of kids. One was in her class, and then the other was a brother to that kid. And so when we started picking her up earlier, she really liked that. And makes sense. My brother and I also got bullied on the school bus back in the day, so we definitely understand, try to avoid those situations as much as possible, right? So we started picking her up early, and she loved it, so we just kind of went with it. So we're sitting there for like a half an hour, and in that time, I was kind of looking on my phone. My mom was looking on her phone. It's like, I don't really want to do a whole lot of talking here because it usually goes a certain kind of way, And as we're sitting there, she says, I don't know the exact wording, but something about, my dad says that I don't ever speak a kind word to him, or whatever. And it's like, I sat there for a second and I was like, huh. I said, but on the other hand, I've never called him a dumb bitch. And she's like, well, he was out of line and shouldn't have done that either. It's like, yeah, but he did. But yes, now we're focusing on how I'm the one that doesn't ever have any kind things to say. Great. Okay. Whatever. And that's, my brother and I are both very aware of that's exactly how these conversations always go, right? And that's why we always try to avoid dealing too much with the family drama. And, this is really stupid because, okay, I'm 41 and he just turned, God, what is he now? 43? He's 2.5 years older. So, my math isn't mathing right now, and I don't really care. So, is what it is. If you want to work out that math, I don't want to. So, maybe just turn 44. Yeah, that sounds more right. But we've talked a lot in the past few months about how it's ridiculous that we're at this point in our lives and we actively try to avoid talking about things around our parents that we know they're not going to like. It's like, I was talking to him the other day. It's like, I'm 41 with nothing to show for it because the way I've been brought up was everything affects the family, and you're not supposed to step out of line or whatever. You have a role to fulfill, and if you're not fulfilling that role, that's a problem. And so to try to do anything else, to try to figure out who I am and navigate my own journey is not really acceptable. And he's kind of the same way, but he is married and has a kid, and a house anyway. You know, I'm 41 and had to move back in with my parents when I was getting a divorce and haven't found my way out just yet. I will. I feel like that's right around the corner, but there's still some stuff I got to work out first. And yeah, so that's my where I am right now. And you know, it's for conversations like yesterday. It's like those are exactly why we've largely tried not to make waves and, you know, try to stay under the radar and not tell them if there's something big coming up until it absolutely can't be avoided or whatever, you know, because we know guilt and shame are the big things that are going to be used against us to keep us in line, keep us doing what we're supposed to be doing. The problem is, as I've been doing my own healing work, I have been realizing that doesn't work for me. I don't want to just continue doing the bullshit that makes me miserable because I'm obligated to because of their viewpoint. And it's kind of funny because like this whole YouTube thing, you know, it's like I'll be talking about something and I'll see it from one perspective, and then as I listen back to it, it's like, this is a both and thing again. It's like, yes, on the one hand, if I'm going to be living here, I should be contributing and everything. On the other hand, it's always been everything in my life that I've gotten, I've had to feel guilty about because I was made to realize that, well, I was made to feel like I owed them specifically for this, this, and this, and this, you know, and then because I was looking at everything from the space of having to owe them something, you know, my basically the whole nature of codependency, right? It's like my mom forever was out for trying to get her daddy's approval and never got it. I mean, never emotionally received any kind of acceptance or anything. But she never stopped trying to earn it. And because that was how she was raised, she tried to impose that on me and my brother. You know, and like the other day, there was a whole ordeal where, I mean, my dad flat out said to my brother that it is the duty of the oldest child to step up and take care of the parents when, you know, when they're older and all this stuff. My brother came up with this big smart-ass remark that he didn't end up sending, and later said he kind of was kicking himself for, but he was talking about, you know, on this day back in this year, I married, you know, his wife and blah, blah, blah. And he's just, the way he was filling it in was a smart ass, in a smart ass way, yes. But very valid points because he chose to marry this woman and have a family with her. And so he says they are his priority, and they should be. But then he gets this message from our dad saying that he's not doing enough because he's the oldest child and he's supposed to have, or he has duties to fulfill in that oldest child area, and catering to his and my mom's bullshit is supposed to be like the big priority. It's like, yeah, see, that's where it becomes a problem, because now you're showing us why we were raised the way we were. It's like, we weren't supposed to have our own lives. We were very much supposed to stay available to feeding into this toxic system that hasn't worked for our benefit at all. We've gotten screwed over with it non-stop our entire lives. And okay, I watched this Gem Goddess tarot reading. Last night was Gem Goddess. Night before was ESO. I think it was the ESO reading. It was one of those where it's like messages from your person kind of a thing, but she's talked about periodically about if this sounds like you, then you may have gotten your own pile, and there's one that I was really drawn to, and then like everything she was saying, it's like, this is stuff I'm going through right now. It's like, I've never had this experience. This is interesting. And she was talking about being emotionally stunted, basically, and it's like, oh fuck, that's my life, right? So that's this whole me navigating this YouTube thing, is trying to figure out how to heal all that crap and fix it and make my life something worthwhile, a life that I want to live rather than just the one that I was raised for. The Gem Goddess one was talking about like career stuff and where are you in 1 year from now, and there were two piles that I was drawn to, and the second of them, she talked a lot about, she was talking about like there's some kind of social media presence and talking about all these different things that seem to be coming together with and through that, but the big thing being to learn to trust your intuition and commit to using your voice, and no matter how much it bothers some people, because there are others that need to hear what you have to say, kind of stuff. Right. But yeah, it was the ESO one that I was thinking of right off. There's enough of them that they run together. And basically, if I have nothing else to do with it for a moment or so, then I'll see if there's anything that grabs my attention that makes me feel like I need to watch that because there's a message for me. And, that's how both of those were. Hey, Buddha. Shh. I don't know what that is. That's just a little robotic thing. I think it's listening to videos that he wasn't able to understand clearly and didn't spend enough time with him, so it's kind of a weird robotic thing when it's not Pink Panther or Another One Bites the Dust. Anyway, where was I? So yeah, the ESO one was about being stunted emotionally. It's like, yeah, I feel like that's my life right there. And trying to resolve that this morning. Okay, I mentioned the other day that I decided to get back on social media again after avoiding it for the majority of a year, or at least Instagram. Facebook I've been on a little more. Yeah. Today I got on there and I watched this one little thing that popped up. This guy was talking about the transmuters. I was like, I've known that I am a transmuter for a while, but sometimes you need to see something about it or hear somebody say something to be reminded of it and work with it differently, I guess. And okay, this one thing that I came across aside from that dude was, it says, no one tells you how hard it is to rewire your brain to allow amazing things to happen after experiencing pain or trauma. Blessings exist, good people exist, and softer life exists. Let it happen. That's from this Awaken Healers page on Instagram. Yeah, but then the guy talking about transmuters, he's like, there's different ways that people do this, and he talked about one way was through communicating with somebody who is feeling especially low or whatever, the presence of the transmuter is able to lift the other person up. And so, when they leave the conversation, then maybe they're both from a higher space, and there were like three different ways that he talked about this happening. And he said the third way is, you basically absorb it all, and then you have to find other ways to release it. It's like, that's what kind I am. It's like, that's why this whole YouTube thing is important for me, is because I absorb the heavy shit. And I feel, I wrote a thing back in the spring about witnessing like the dense emotions, and I think that's a big part of what I'm here to do, right? So I pick up the icky stuff and carry it with me until I find a way to release it. And there are various ways that can happen. Yesterday I spent a whole lot of time crying, but it didn't really feel like it made it go away. And then, it's like there were other things that came up along the way, like that kind of made it feel even heavier. And then there were also a few things that popped up that kind of spun it around. It's like, hey, don't be so negative. Here's this other thing. Like, okay, we stopped in Walmart after we had to take Gracie to her dance studio. She had to dance last night, and we met her mom and dad there. And her mom was going to get her ready for her dance class there, and then, all that fun stuff. Anyway, we were in Greenfield, so my mom's like, I want to run to Aldi's. She's like addicted to grapes, so we had to get more grapes. Well, Aldi's was out of grapes, so we had to go to Walmart. And so we went over there, and when we were on the way out, since it was Tuesday, they had like this little pretzel place at the front of the store, and they had like pretzels for $2.50. She was like, we could do that. It's like, we did that last week too. We just happened to be there on Tuesday again. It's like, all right, discount pretzel, whatever. But we go over to this pretzel stand, and she's ordering, and the girl that she's talking to stops and looks at me, and she's like, oh my God, I just love your hair. And like, she got really fixated on it for like a minute, and it just kept going on and on. She was talking about it looked like the Aurora Borealis or whatever. It's like, okay, I've talked on here before about compliments tend to make me uncomfortable. And I'm noticing here lately, if I didn't have dogs in this room right now, I would let him out, so he'd probably be over here with me. Buddha, you're distracting me, dude. Yeah, so I have a weird relationship with compliments, and okay, so yesterday I had some that popped up attached to the video. It was like, I can say thank you and move on. But if it's in person, then it's like, and somebody gets really fixated, it's like, I don't know what to do with this, and this makes me really uncomfortable. Last week, somebody said they loved my makeup as I was talking to somebody else. It's like I was paying for the class at Inner Path. So I was paying the one girl for that, and this other girl came over and said that, and like she just kept staring at me, and I was like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to look, I don't know what's happening, this makes me really uncomfortable. She said a couple things about it, and then she just stood there, and I was just kind of like really awkward, and it's like, I don't know how to respond, I don't know what to do here, and last night was kind of like that too, because it's just like, that's a lot of intensity with that compliment too. And like she was really excited about like my hair and describing how the colors went together and everything. It's like, okay, thank you. but I didn't know how to respond with it. So, but that goes back to that point of when I was growing up, it was always followed up with something kind of shitty. So, the day I'm walking down the hallway to go back to my room, which is now my office, and my mom called me into her room for a minute just to say, you're a very pretty girl, but sometimes you don't act like it. And it's like, I was seriously just walking from the bathroom into my bedroom, and you felt the need to say the mean thing when you didn't have to say anything, but you had to say the mean thing. So it's like all this dense crap that gets put out there around me. It's like I absorb all of that. And so like part of where my emotional stunting came in at, I think, is absorbing all this kind of shit and not knowing how to release it, how to let it out of my system. So it just kind of stays there pent up with nowhere to go. When I was in middle school, there was a brief time where if nobody was home, I put on Paula Abdul or whatever and go dancing around the living room, and or Prince, love Prince, but I didn't realize that was a way to let that out of my system until here more recently, and like I've Buddha, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, but like the importance of getting into your body and, like skating. I'm addicted to skating right now because I don't have to keep all this heavy energy in my system. Except for right now, I can't skate because there's 10 inches of snow on the ground. And the bigger thing on that one is the fact that it's like 15 degrees out, and that's a little too chilly for my liking. If it was like 30, it'd be another story. But yeah, I mean, salt also. Yeah, I don't know. Salt's not really a big deal because my wheels squash it pretty easily. But yeah. But yeah, that whole getting into your body thing, it's like, because that's one way to release it from your system, right? And then, so I've spent hours upon hours skating. I had one day that I did 21 miles just to prove to myself that I could. And in hindsight, I wanted to do that one more time before the year was out and did not make it. Of course, there was all the drama and being back and forth with the hospital and all that shit. And so it didn't happen. I'm going to do it again, though. But on the flip side of it, 3.5 hours is a bit much to commit to skating just like in the middle of the day. So I'll probably have to start earlier whenever I go to do that again. Yeah. But whatever. Oh, yeah, but yeah, dancing. It's very helpful. I was even walking my dogs a lot to stay in nature, which again, 15 degrees and 10 inches of snow makes it a little complicated to get motivated to do that. So I mean, luckily there are other ways. Like last night when I was talking to my brother, it's like, I said, there were a couple things I was going to do, but the biggest one was like, I have to go take a really hot shower and just like scrub myself with the salt and try to get all of this out of my system. And it did work. It took me way too long to get to that point where I was able to do that. And I feel like when my defenses are already low because my morning was, I went from good to kind of shitty, and then that just kind of lingered all day, and it's like, this ongoing thing that I have to witness it in some kind of way and release it through, hey, crying. So, so tears are very cleansing as well. But, God, I did so much of that yesterday. It was so aggravating. But at the same time, I think of the time period where I kind of prided myself on the fact that I finally got to a point when I was younger that I wasn't crying over everything. But it's like usually something sad comes on TV. Okay, they're like those, any of the commercials talking about the starving kids or abused animals or whatever. It's like the first note or two of the Sarah McLachlan Angel song came on. It's like I automatically start tearing up because I know it's associated with. It's like, fuck, here we go again. But I think that's one of those things. It's like a lot of people do get to the point where they can shut off the emotional side of it. I can't do that anymore. Now it's just like, releasing it all. And I think it's even the stuff I pick up, sometimes it just needs to be witnessed to be released. And that's a big thing. So yeah. But, of course, this talking thing is a big part of it as well. And, I had a roommate in undergrad that my sophomore year, we were really close. And we had a few nights where we would be talking and, she'd be kind of doing her homework and multitasking and whatnot and just letting me talk. And I would be like laying on the floor, basically having therapy, just talking about all these things being connected. And it's like, why does it seem like everything traumatic in my life goes back to this time frame of like between 8 and 12 years old, and why is everything related and why, it's just like every time I started talking, if it was starting to go to really processing through things, it would go to the sad, heavy stuff from, that started when I was 8 and then just kind of keep going from there, and then I watched that ESO video and she's talking about being emotionally stunted. It's like, yep, that was totally me. And I think that's a big part of, so I've talked about on here a few times about wanting to do a podcast with my brother and Ben. And I think that's kind of on hold right now, but my brother and I have been talking quite a bit, and he feels like there's something more he's supposed to be doing on that end too. And I've gotten all these messages about collaborations and whatnot. It's like, I think we got to start with collaborating there, because we're both going through or unraveling a lot of the same type of issues that we've both been carrying our entire lives, but we're just doing it in different ways, and talk therapy is the big thing, but, obviously that plays out differently because mine is on YouTube and his is on, was his group and, his therapist. So I guess the other part of that is, since I wasn't given an option for going to college after high school, it's like if I had the choice, I would have taken a little time off to try to figure out myself and what I wanted to do at that point in time, but it was never an option for us. So, because our mom had gotten married, she got married a month before she graduated high school. It's like, well, that was your decision, and in hindsight, I probably, if I was this mouthy version of me, I would have said, that was you making those decisions, and it was not my decision to go to undergrad when I did. But since I had no other option, it's like, well, I might as well, I guess, try to get to know myself. So my classes were in like psychology and religious studies, because those were two big interest points in my life. And I figured I could maybe figure something out with them. Well, then I got to the point of realizing that, you know, how much that screws you over too is when you went to school for the thing to try to learn more about yourself because you didn't know anything about yourself, but you had to go to school. So then you either have to go for further studies, because psychology don't do a whole lot with just a bachelor's in psychology. You usually have to go for like a master's or something, right? So I did find a job that ended up connecting with that for a while and gave me a little bit more money because of that. But it was one of those, it's like, it was so exhausting being there because, of course, mental health. And I didn't want to go to further schooling for that. You know, I had this, I wasn't entirely sure I wasn't having some kind of nervous breakdown toward the end of it. My junior year, I was living in this house off campus with 5 other girls, and I was the last one to move into that place, and the room was in the basement. And it was a fully furnished basement, so it was fine, but it was a weird basement. And there was like this boarded up window looking thing in my room, and my dad said he thought it was probably like an old coal chute or something for the house. It's like, okay, maybe, but that's still creepy. Yeah, and there was some weird stuff that happened there. There was one night. Okay. I don't know where to start on that one. It's like, okay, there are 2 stories that I think I'm overlapping, but I was having really weird dreams while I was in that house. Okay, so one day, it was a Friday, and I was going to be home alone for like 2 hours before any of the roommates got back. And I think at least one of them was going to be back late. And then I think the rest were maybe like the next day or after the weekend at home or whatever. I don't remember. I had a class at 2 or 3, so sometime, I think the class was at 3, and then I was walking home knowing that I was going back to this house by myself. And the entire walk, it was like I had these voices that were just like kind of laughing, like sadistically laughing, and, you know, really negative voices that were speaking to me the entire time. And it's like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel all this shit. And by the time I got into the house, I ended up going straight down into the bathroom in the basement, and I sat on the lid of the toilet, and like I had my hands over my ears, and I was just like rocking back and forth crying because I had like these voices screaming at me and laughing at me and everything. And it's like, I didn't know what it was, but I thought I was just having a nervous breakdown or something was wrong, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I just sat down there and was rocking with my hands over my ears and singing like old Bible school songs and stuff, trying to make it go away, and it wouldn't go away. And I don't know how long that was going on before like I don't know where I got to kind of come down from that before any of my housemates were there. But I always had really weird dreams in that house too. And there was one night, it was like early in the morning, and I want to say probably like 6-ish a.m. because like there was I had a window at the top by the ceiling, so if there was a fire, I would be able to get out, kind of a thing. And I kept like a couple pieces of cardboard over it to keep anybody else from being able to look in, if they're walking past and see a light on or something. So I had like this cardboard up there, but it didn't cover the entire window, so I could still see when there was light coming in. And I had this dream, and there were like 4 different scenes to it that were kind of, I don't know if I can remember them all. Maybe. Then it jumped from like one to the next. But I had this dream that started, I was driving with 3 of my cousins in the car. And I think we were coming out of, we had been watching a movie or something, and I was taking 2 of them back to their house. And mind you, it's a dream. So there's like all these flashing lights, and like it's dark and late and creepy. And there's like all these cop cars with the lights flashing, and they're looking in this field for somebody. And for some reason, I end up talking to one of them who's shining a light. Well, okay, there was a bunch of people lined up that had, it's like there was a group of them that had gotten away or something. They were, shining lights in the guys' faces, and they were still looking for one in particular. And it seemed like a really bad dude or something, so it was really creepy. And I'm there with kids in the car at first. At some point they just disappeared. But how did that play out? At some point, the guy they were looking for ended up over by my by the passenger side of the car and was trying to get in, but I had the doors locked and everything. But then when I went to start the car, because for some reason it shut off, I realized I was sitting in the back seat, and it's like, clearly I wasn't in control, right? That was the big point of that part of the dream. But then it shifted to the scene where it's like my parents were in bed asleep, and for some reason I was in the middle of their bed on top of all the blankets, but I was staring at the door, and there was like this black Grim Reaper type figure in the door, and I was freaking out, and they were sound asleep, and I was trying to make it go away, and whatever. I don't really remember anything specifically, but then I end up in this next scene where it's like 5 o'clock and I'm in the kitchen, and my mom's in there for some reason, and then my dad comes in, and like when it was just me and my mom, I looked at her and I said, "Grandpa died." It was my dad's dead. And she said, "What?" And I said, "I don't know how I know. I just know Grandpa died." And she told me, okay, my dad walks in the room, so she tells me to tell him what I was just telling her about. And so I, said the same thing. And it's like, I don't know how I know, I just know, and then about that time, my aunt calls and tells my dad that my grandpa's gone in the dream. In reality, I think he'd already passed away at this point in time, because he did die that year. And I think that was a scene of it too. There was another scene where I was sitting in this classroom with my best guy friend from high school, Charlie. He's my adopted brother. And the guy that I had dated back then. And we're sitting in this classroom, and at these big round tables, And my dad walks in and he's got my grandpa by the arm, and he's taking him to the front of the classroom. It's got one of those old overhead projectors up there, and my grandpa is writing on it. And I was so caught up in trying to figure out how to number my paper that I didn't really pay attention to what was going on until I looked up and saw the question he'd written on the board said, or on the overhead said, "What is the one thing you are the most afraid of?" And then I was just sitting there staring like, what the hell is this? And I think there was another scene to the dream as well, but I ended up waking up and I'm laying there in bed too afraid to move. I think the scene with my grandpa was like the second scene. I don't know. But then there's this whole weird thing. But I wake up and it felt like there was someone standing behind me. And I was so afraid of, like, I wouldn't move. Like, I couldn't move. I'm trying to let my eyes adjust. And in hindsight, I kind of wonder if it was like a sleep paralysis kind of a thing. If that's the case, that's the only time I've ever had that kind of experience. And maybe one other. But, like, that's the big one. But, like, I was so afraid to move, it felt like something was breathing down the back of my neck, and I couldn't turn around or anything. And it's like, what do I do? I'm just like freaking out. Eventually, I had like this little parrot lamp that was on the shelf, the creepy window shelf, by the head of my bed, and I was able to reach around and turn that on finally, but it took a while before I got to that point. It just felt like there was something behind me breathing down my neck, and I could not move, and so many of those experiences. But especially that year, like the first year I was living off campus, like I would go, Ball State had this swing dancing club that I participated in for a little while, and the meetings for that were in the evening, and then I would have to walk home by myself at night, and it was super creepy, and all those voices and everything. But then add in the creepy element of it's in the dark, and the neighborhood that I lived in was not super well lit or anything. It was just like, once you got past the edge of campus and are venturing into the off-campus housing areas, and it's like a whole new level. I had several of those like Grim Reaper type dreams while I was there. I had one night, I had a friend that spent the night, and she slept on the couch that was in the little living room area right outside my door, at the bottom of the stairs. That was the other part. My room was right next to the stairs, which wasn't really an issue or anything, but just add that little creepy element. And a thing that came to mind is my brother used to talk about the people under the stairs kind of a thing. Like, he was into the scary stuff a lot longer, or a lot earlier than I was, and would tell me all sorts of creepy stuff that he hung over, right? It was creepy as hell. Now, whatever, it is what it is. It doesn't faze me like it did back then. Like, then it was terrifying. And now I watch horror movies for fun, so yeah. But like the same stuff that I wouldn't have let myself watch before. And for reasons like this. Because I had these complicated dreams and complicated experiences. And I was since I was going to school for psychology, we had a class, I think it might have been the next week after I had that experience with the hearing the voices and all that stuff, and ending up in the bathroom, sitting on the lid of the toilet, hands over my ears, singing Bible school songs and rocking back and forth, trying to make it go away. And I'm pretty confident that was the next week. I had this one, I think it was an abnormal psychology class that I was in, and they had an audio tape of what it sounded like for somebody that was going through like a schizophrenic experience. It's like, oh, cool, that sounds like exactly what I was listening to and what was happening that day that I was at home by myself. And great. So I thought legitimately that I was having a meltdown. But now I'm seeing it more as, this is something that I've always been doing, is picking up on the energies in the environment around me. Before, I didn't know it was something that you even could do to protect your energy from that kind of stuff. So it's all just latching on, and I can't make it go away, And, Abraham Hicks talks about, like, thought forms, and if you're in an area where there's been some kind of traumatic event, then, I think the one that they were talking about, and that experience with somebody from the audience had talked about a bridge collapse or something, and like this irrational fear that she found herself dealing with that was associated to this other thing. And Abraham Hicks was talking about how if you're in an area that has had some kind of massive trauma where huge numbers of people were affected by it, then that that fear basically gets embraced by the collective, and it's a thought form that others end up picking up on. And so if you have this kind of irrational thing that comes along, it might be associated to something like that. So it's like, okay, so hi. Kid just coming to see me. Yeah, but that was the whole thing. Thank you. Yes, I love you so much. I love this dog. Yes, I love all these dogs. Like, she's tired of hanging out in here. She don't get why I talk to my phone all the time, but it's not her favorite thing. And she would really like to play BALL, and she's gonna find me one, because I know there's at least one in here. But yeah. Oh, today's Ziva's birthday. She's 12. So that's a happy thing. I told her she's got to make it to at least 15. Preferably more like 20, but she's a Kelpie, you never know. I think there was 2 dogs for a while. One of them was a blue heeler that was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for, I'm pretty sure it was the heeler that was in the records. Because of course they had to prove the age on the dog, right? And there was a 30-year-old blue heeler and a 29-year-old Australian Kelpie, and the Kelpie, I think, was the one that couldn't be proven because they didn't have paperwork from when she was a puppy. But those are 2 of the big breeds we got around here. So Ziva's a Kelpie, and Taz is a blue heeler, and then Gidget is a blue heeler Australian Shepherd mix. So I told them they all got to be like 15 plus. Yeah. Anyway, thought forms, all that fun stuff. Yeah. So the transmuting thing. It's like, so basically you're just picking up on the energies in the environment. And since I'm the kind that absorbs all the things and has to figure out how to release them, that's the whole thing. Which, that's only come from this past year and a half. Largely associated with the twin flame stuff, and realizing that there's this whole other layer of things that are going on, and like the whole purpose of the twin flame connection is to basically force me to step into higher levels of myself and to clear out the negativity and the dense lower stuff and move into higher ways of being. So like that's a whole thing in and of itself, right? Yeah. So the Inner Path group meets tonight, and I want to go, largely because this is the only space that I know of that has people that will appreciate some of the things that have been going on for me that I want to talk about. So, like, I talked about how, I told like 5 different people about the weird stuff from the weekend and how they all kind of converged together and nobody really got it. And it's like, this is the group that will get some of that. So I have written down like the stuff that I told my friends and my brother and all that. And I'm trying to organize it because it's like there's so much more to this, and I think this is the big story that I'm supposed to be writing about. Just like all the things being interwoven and how I'm starting to connect the dots and all that, because that's a big part of what I'm doing is connecting dots and finding all the ways these things are connected, navigating that for myself so I can share it with others. Yeah. But I want to write down more of those details because there's like weird dreams, visions that I've seen and just like other stuff. And yeah. And there's that. Okay. I told my brother the other day because he was talking about ADHD meds or something. It's like, I said, that stuff, he was talking about being all stressed out with something on it and it always affects him some kind of way and blah blah blah. I said I used to be on a whole bunch of meds after I got my TBI. I said, and it got to a point, when dealing with the bullshit with my ex and his son's mother putting us on a protective order, filing a protective order against us, primarily against him, just to keep his son from being able to be around him. But the day that protective order finally came, obviously, there was a delay because it had to be delivered by the sheriff. The sheriff kept showing up when he was at work, and there was one day I was finally like, you need to go talk to this guy or call him and tell him you are home so he can bring you this paperwork and just get it over with. Because like he kept coming during the day when he wasn't there, or if it was in the evenings, weren't always there either. It's like, just get the shit, figure it out. And of course, when he finally got it, I saw my name was on it in a couple places too, and I was beyond pissed because, for obvious reasons, because it was all made up shit. It was the biggest thing. But I was telling my brother, it's like, when that finally was delivered and I looked at it, I went to take my anxiety meds and I stopped and looked in the mirror and it's like, there is a very real problem here and it is not going to go away until it is dealt with. And so it's like, that was I never took any of those anxiety meds or anything after that. It's like, I went to pouring myself into putting the pieces of this story together and how she was, weaving all the shit to, there would be an element of truth with okay, there was one day we went to my former in-laws' house and I sat in the car with the kid while my ex went in and was talking to his parents and his brother because the kid wasn't supposed to be around his brother. But then there's this whole story that she threw out there about how we took him over there to be further abused. It's like, you're gonna fucking say that I contributed to this child's alleged abuse? It's like, no. It's like, you clearly do not know me if you think I would put up with that shit. So I was furious, and like then it became like this thing that I was like very fixated on. We're going to tear this story apart, and we're going to come up with all the pieces of what she found that were the evidence in there and destroy that, you know, and show how the things, or all the things that she made up because she assumed things, you know. And like the bigger part of that was public information when my ex's grandma died. And she took the information from the paper that she would have, or computer, whatever, she would have found that information that he had passed, or she'd passed away, you know, and when the visitation was and all that stuff. What she didn't know was, you know, the day that his grandma died, we were going back to Indy to pick up his kid for spring break. And we were having this conversation, like we were on the road 5 minutes, and my ex-mother-in-law said she passed away, and, you know, was talking about this stuff, and it's like, should we go back and get funeral clothes and all this stuff? And I looked at him, I said, no. I said, your brother lost his grandmother as well. He needs to be able to mourn his grandmother's death without your child, who has been, you know, coerced into lying about him in various ways, without the worry of him being there and more shit coming up. I said, so no, we're going to go up there, get the kid, and go with our original plans of turning back around and coming back home, and letting the kid enjoy some time on the beach and whatnot. You know, and I had pictures from the day of the funeral and the visitation and all that, and being on the beach, you know, and different things we were doing, you know, stuff you can timestamp even. You know, so I got pictures with the timestamps on them, and, you know, that was court evidence after that. And it's like, you know, having all these things that we actually did in spite of what she was claiming we did. It's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that shit no more. And I kind of feel like that's a big part of why I am who I am in this world anyway, because there's a lot of shit that's got to be dealt with right now, you know. And if nothing else, I am good at putting pieces together and, you know, kind of navigating the puzzles in that way. Especially with all this like energy stuff, it's just yeah, I watched that guy with that thing talking about the transmuters earlier, and then I was like, hey, that, you know, that makes me think of this thing that I wrote back in the fall, and then I was like, maybe I'll share it again. Like one of the other things, like the Inner Path class, Annie talked about, you know, like totem animals and whatnot, and the stuff that reoccur for you and all these things. And so it got to a point where vultures were like very predominant in the past year, and somebody had mentioned it in the group, and then after that there was like this huge span of time where a day did not go by that I did not see one, if not 20 vultures flying around, you know. So, you know, and it kind of made me do some thinking, of course, on the transmuting end and whatnot. So, yeah, so what the hell, I'll read it again. Maybe I won't have the awkward side of my face the whole time or whatever. I make no promises. Yeah, so what I wrote, and I'll probably write it out in the description for the video even. Says, we are like the vulture. We come into the death of the world, allow the suffering of those struggling to ensue, and after the process of death is complete, we transmute the energy of that suffering. We have had our own suffering and have dove deep into the depths within ourselves so that we could be among the first of the collective to conquer pain that many have tried to avoid. Up there goes the side of my face again. Not all of us have made it. Some have taken their own lives as they got lost to the pain and suffering they thought was theirs alone to carry. Most wore that burden as a cloak and teetered on the line of fear, often choosing ways to further harm self by harming others in order to find more reason to force ourselves to succumb to death that we otherwise struggled to bring ourselves into, believing that we must be bad if so much burden was ours to carry. Through the years, those like us have been cursed and damned to hell. We have learned to navigate through a world where we couldn't see beyond our own pain. We failed to understand that we were, in fact, also carrying the pain of those condemning us to these depths because they couldn't see it for what it was and instead chose to bury it within the darkest places they strove never to face. We bore those chains, drowned in lonely despair, and often tried to hide the pain beneath addictions of all sorts: drugs, alcohol, food, unfulfilling relationships, sex, self-harm, and so on. They thought they were better than the darkness. They tried to cling to the light they perceived so they could stay above the darkness. They perceived darkness as evil. They perceived us to be lesser than they and cursed our resistance to conformity, while they hid amongst others just like themselves and conformed to structures they refused to acknowledge as fatally flawed, while pointing fingers stating that we were the problem. We got lost in lack of boundaries of what was ours and what was not, and tried to fix all the pain that was put upon us, thinking that if we were able to feel it, that somehow meant we must also be responsible for fixing it as well. This is not our burden. As we have transmuted the density surrounding us, we have freed ourselves and others to be able to see and hear more clearly the comforting and supportive nudges that are in fact our brothers and sisters communicating with us throughout time and space, assuring us that we are on the right path, moving in the right direction. All along we have been communicating with one another, but failing to understand it. We heard the collective whispers and the fearful thought forms clung to us, attempting to take us deeper into the darkness. The heavier the density we fell to, the scarier and more unclear the veiled messages appeared to us. Some called them demons. For some time they kept us in the depths successfully, but what the masses didn't realize was that the further into the depths we went, the more expansive and higher the heights we would be able to take on in time. Now is that time. We come with our art, our stories, our music, our created things, and offer them to the world that tried to banish us into the darkness. We found love for self that the world tried to condemn, and recognized that it is not only beautiful but necessary and worthwhile. We can love far deeper than the feeble loves of the condemning world because we know what lurks in the darkness, the diamond that is us. Our love is not of conditions as the world failing to see its own shortcomings and demanding others to somehow be better. Our love sees our own imperfections and recognizes them as opportunities for the vulnerability of imperfection to bring us closer in connection with other imperfect beings whose skills differ from our own, but are in no way better or worse and are very much needed. Together we are a beautiful mosaic meant to learn and grow, finding a better way of existing in the world and with the world together. We thought we were alone. We were never alone. We are a collective of transmuters. We are among the first to take on such a daunting task in a faithless world, claiming to be the faithful to the shallow stories that deny the truth of who we are and what we came here to do. We grew up hearing the condemnation of evil while never really being able to understand evil as it was offered to us, yet also hearing that all we were was somehow bad as well. We experienced the worst we were capable of and learned that the situations we ended up in were imposed upon us by a flawed world and those incapable of looking fully into the mirror of self. We were forced to stare long and hard into that mirror. In time, we came to realize that the mirror was staring back into us as well, challenging who we believed ourselves to be and nudging us along the path of discovery so it too could understand what we learned. So yeah. I'll put that in the description this time. I was trying to figure out how I could share that again. It's like, I can just put it there. And I got my little, I've read it on here twice now. Once was a little short video just reading that. And yeah. So it's mine. But yeah, that whole transmuting thing. Oh, here's another thing. So I talked about the miscommunication amongst friends the other day. I think that friendship's kind of done. You know, been looking at some things with like talking about astrology and what's going on with the planets and the stars and all that fun stuff right now. And one of the themes is that some things are being highlighted to basically show the ones that aren't going to be able to go with you into the next phase of your life, kind of a thing. It's like, well, I feel like that's a whole lot of the relationships around me at present. Dude, you kind of stink. We need to get you a bath. That's Gidgy, which is in my face again. Anyway, she can find me her ball. It's over there on the floor. She's standing by it. So anyway, yeah, so with what's going on astrologically speaking, it's like some of these connections are basically being highlighted to show that they're not going to be able to go into the next phase of your life with you, kind of a thing. And I think that's a big part of what that whole deal was with the Derby friends. And see, it's kind of weird because when I first retired from Derby, there was a good span of time where I wasn't talking to either of these people very much. And I haven't really talked to one of them hardly at all, except for in the group context. And the other one, we went a long time without speaking, and then we started speaking again. And now I feel like that's just kind of... Then this kerfluffle happened, right? And yesterday I mentioned, what do you do with that after the situations come up? You've had the apologies and whatnot, but obviously some things were brought to light. So what do you do with that? And can it be fixed? Kind of a thing. And after I got off of the video and went to the messenger, the conversation stream, I saw that she had left the group chat. It's like, well, I feel like that pretty much just shows where that is and where that's at, and like with this whole transmuting thing, my brother's talked before about how he's made comments. Okay. I said that at one point, like with the whole marriage situation, it's like I felt like I found the worst possible option because I needed for either my dad or my brother to be the ones to say this situation's not good for you. And neither one of them did it. And my brother said that he felt personally like, he was in the Air Force at the time and was living in Arizona or somewhere at that point. And he said he felt like he'd been gone long enough. He didn't have the right to say anything. And he said our dad probably felt like, well, it's so explosive if I... when I have a meltdown or whatever, I can be scary with my overreactions or whatever. And it was like, I think that's what a big part of this whole thing is, this transmuting. It's like, okay, when I was in Alabama, my ex was watching something on TV that it was like I was passing through the room and I heard what they were talking about. Just very briefly, was talking about the legend of the Rainbow Warriors, and I stopped and I just had this thought pop into my head of, that's why I'm here. It's like, okay. And of course the legend, I don't know what tribe it's associated with, but talks about how at a time when the world is dying, a group of people will basically show up to show the world a better way, of love and existing and all that fun stuff. Obviously, I'm not super familiar with the specifics of how it was worded, but it was just the idea being put out there, and it's like I was walking through and just stopped. It's like, that's why I'm here. If I know nothing else, I know that there is something to this. And another thing that came up, like on the social media stuff that I was following at the time, or like I would catch on, people post memes and whatnot, and then you get distracted by stories and other various things. And this other thing came up, and it was talking about the Hyoka empath. And, it's like this, the sacred clown, and I don't remember all the details of that either, but basically, what I'm thinking of it is reflecting back what others are putting out there, right? And when the thing came up yesterday with my dad, and how it started with my morning getting torn apart because I was all excited about having won this thing, and then he feels the need to say something back, and then I just told him, I was like, butt out, I got it, and then next thing I know, I'm being told that he says I don't ever say a kind thing to him or whatever. It's like, one of the things I was thinking about as I was like clearing all this out of my system yesterday, which I feel immensely better, by the way, and I haven't cried so far on the video today that I remember. So I think there's progress on that end. But I was thinking about how it's like, I feel like basically something is said, and it's like it goes through all these other layers of what's the deeper point of what is being said. And it's like, that is what hits me. And it's like, I can, like, he did not specifically call me a dummy yesterday, but the sarcasm that he said, well, then it's probably not connected with, or connected to your phone or whatever. It's like, the way he said it, it's like, it goes through these layers and then hits me in that point of, he has, called me names before and all this other stuff. And it's like I receive it and it just kind of sits in my system, and then it's just like fling it back. It's like the visual that I was having of it. Actually, that might have been a this morning thing, as I was trying to wake up after having cleansed my system and all that stuff. But it's like, especially with my brother having made that point of never knowing or of me being temperamental and never knowing how I was going to react at any point in time. It's like, because I take on all this, the deeper levels of what's actually being thrown at me, and send that back. And, it's what I've been realizing like through this YouTube thing is that most things that I've talked about are kind of a both and thing. Because, fact is, I was raised in a codependent family, and, that's a whole thing. It has gotten me to the point of being 41 and having nothing to show for it, right? So, the issue that I've had in my entire lifetime is knowing that this is basically how I've been raised, but not knowing how to do anything on my own without getting in trouble for it or feeling in some kind of way. Like, okay, I told my brother, it's like, when I was 40, was when I got these right before I turned 41, like all these extra piercings, right? But anytime in my life, and mind you, I was in my 20s before I got my first tattoo, but anytime in my life that I did something that I knew she wasn't going to approve of, it's like it was this big ordeal to try to avoid dealing with it altogether or owning up to it or whatever. It's like, I have like 10 tattoos now. The last one I got was the first time I did not immediately jump to questioning myself and stressing out about, oh, this is going to be the thing that sends me to hell or whatever, you know. And it's like the very last one, and that was September 13th, that I went on the appointment with the friend that bailed on the friendship or whatever. That was the first time, like, okay, I didn't have to feel bad about that one, because normally if I say I have an appointment and I'm vague about it, if I say anything about broad ripple, she knows I'm going to come back with either a tattoo or a piercing of some sort. So then it got to a point where I was saying I have an appointment, because I did, you know. But then, you know, like I came back with like 5 new piercings. It's like this one, this one, this one, this one, and, you know, the other third hole. You know, I did that all at once, and oh, she was, she wasn't happy. But it's like, at 40, 41, it's like, why is this still such a thing that I have to feel like I'm doing something wrong and be sketchy about doing the thing I want to do just because I want to do it? But I always had to feel bad, because she was always made me feel that I was somehow doing something wrong. It's like, that's where that came in at, you know. So the fact that me and my brother always feel bad about the big conversations that we have to have or whatever with her, it's like, that, see, everything always rode on shame and guilt, and it has not mattered what kind of income I had at the time I did anything. It was always the fact that I did it was wrong. And it's like, that's not cool. You know, my yeah, there's just a whole lot to that, but trying to navigate this whole thing, right? And yeah, I feel like that's exactly why I am where I am. You know, and yeah, sure, the like the piercings, it's like I still felt kind of weird about that, because, you know, I don't have the highly disposable income at this point in time. But it hasn't mattered, because the times that I had the really good jobs and was making like $22 an hour or whatever, it's like, she still made me feel like shit about it. And it's like, that's the bigger problem right there, is you don't get that kind of control over what's going on in my life, what I want to do with my life. It's my life, my freaking body. If I want to put a hole in it, or, you know, get ink done, whatever, kids just looking at me again, then I should be able to do that without having to feel bad about it first. But nope, we always had to feel bad about it first. It's like, this is stupid. Yeah. Hi. You coming to see me? She might just have to go potty. She's been in here a while too. But there's also a ball right by my toe now. So yeah. Navigating through that stuff. But because I've been picking up and absorbing all of the shit that isn't mine from the environment around me, it's like, well, this is why I feel like I'm stunted. And having to work through all this stuff now, right? So yeah. Oh, and that was the other thing I was thinking with that friend. It's like, I feel, you know, like, this is kind of more her thing anyway, because she's the one that said, this is why I don't ever talk to anybody, because I'm incapable of communicating in such and such way or whatever, and, you know, everybody gets mad at me and that kind of thing. It's like, I don't feel like there's anything I would have been able to do differently for that anyway. You know, what happened was she felt there was some kind of connection in what I was doing compared to what her husband was not doing for helping her, kind of a thing. And so she pulled me into this conversation, and I reacted because I got pulled into a conversation. It's like, yeah, that's the problem. But that goes back to that whole self-fulfilling prophecy is one way of looking at it. Just, you're going to get what you're going to see, right? Or what you're trying to see. So if you're assuming that everybody is only going to, or that you're really bad at communicating with people and nobody's going to want to be your friend, then you're also going to, in a way, be looking for those opportunities to prove that point to yourself as well. Excuse me. There was another thing that, like, I was scrolling through something Aaron Dowdy had posted earlier, and he was talking about closing the loop. And it's like, see, I think that's kind of what this is with her. I think she's kind of trying to prove that to herself, that she shouldn't be talking to people because she doesn't or isn't able to maintain the friendships and all this stuff. So she's looking in that way, energetically speaking, she's looking for the opportunity to prove to herself that her story is right. It's like, if somebody's trying to, to close the loop on that story, but refusing to heal from it, then basically that's not on me. I can't fix it for her. I accepted her apology, gave her some ways of how she could have approached that without dragging me into it, and also apologized that I did react the way I did as quickly as I did. But at the end of the day, if she's looking to prove that she is incapable of maintaining friendships or whatever, then I can't fix that for her. And after a lifetime of picking up other people's stuff and taking it on as my own and realizing that I can't heal everybody's stuff, I can only heal things for myself, and resolve them in my own system and do that for the collective. Somebody else trying to hold on to their wounds, you're not going to fix. So I think that's one of those examples of the situation just being highlighted to show me that we're making space now. Because the people that I've had in my life, primarily, most of them kind of outgrown, honestly. And I know that probably sounds kind of crappy, but at the end of the day, what can you do? Like, it's not me trying not to give anybody, a hand up where possible. Because, like, when I felt like my brother, like, his energy or whatever was communicating to me that this wasn't his lifetime to awaken, it's like, okay, and that's fine if he doesn't have all of this stuff come together for him in the same way I am doing, but I refuse to not do anything that could help him, and so I started talking to him a lot more about what was going on, and even if he didn't get it, he ended up finding ways that he was having to confront it in his own life as well, and then realizing maybe there's some legitimacy to what I'm talking about. 2:22 on my rightish clock, but I do not know if I left the light on all night. It's plugged in, so I don't know if it's just dim because of that or if it's just dim because of the window behind it, but it is what it is. Anyway, since it's 2:22, I need to probably wrap this up so I can go figure out what all details I want to tell the group tonight, so I can write it down in some kind of organized thought, so I'm not just there being all scrambled in the group like I would normally be otherwise. And like starting out today, I was back to that hedging around, what am I going to talk about, and where should I start, and all these details and all that fun stuff. So I was like, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so I need to go figure out what this dog wants and go do the writing stuff. So yeah. I love this dog. She's so goofy. Let's see if she'll let me. Hi. What you doing? Now, you'll notice her little ball. Oh, yep, that's the word. That's the magic word. Ball. Yeah, got it started now. Okay, enough. Come here. Got him wound up. That's enough. Okay. Yeah. Got my birthday girl down now, too. Stop. So anyway, yeah, now that I got the kids all wound up, I'm going to go call it a day. So as always, I appreciate you. And until next time, see ya.